Trust and consequence. Early morning, the best part of the day. Sanity before the chaotic madness of hyperactive 4-year-old twins and a wife who could give the bossy female on Dragon's Den a run for her money. And today was starting off particularly well. Twins were on a sleepover and my wife had stayed overnight at her friend Maria's. Best of all, there was no school today. The sun was filtering into the conservatory and, as I placed a bottle of Chablis in the fridge, I had a brief delicious thought as to how we might spend the afternoon if we could just distract the kids for an hour or so. Wine sorted, I scooped up the local paper from the hallway, poured myself a coffee and settled down for a rare 15 minutes of uninterrupted reading. Nothing new on the sports pages, so I turned to the inside. And that was when a good day turned bad. When I first read the article, I couldn't believe it. Official cause of death was an overdose. But I knew the real reason. I knew exactly when it had all began. June the 21st, 2004. The day had started off badly. I had missed my usual 7:48 train after another savage row with Sarah over my never being at home. Then, when I finally managed to fight my way onto the 8:04, it was standing room all the way from Milton Keynes to Euston. It meant that I couldn't work on my presentation to the board that was scheduled for later that afternoon. I'd set aside the 50-minute journey to finalize my strategy to persuade them not to make cutbacks in my section, not an easy task against the backdrop of a looming recession. I needed to be on top of my game, and standing in a fog of garlic and stinky armpits wasn't my idea of good preparation. The train pulled into platform 11 at Euston and I was propelled through the barriers inside a mass of humanity containing briefcases, folding bikes and rucksacks. I headed down to the Victoria line and managed to cram onto the third tube, absent-mindedly jamming my foot in the door to allow a black-haired girl with a red top and saucer eyes to board the train. After a brief eye contact, she turned away and I was left looking at her green backpack. 4 stops later, I hopped off my usual front carriage at Victoria and was first onto the escalator. I'd just put a foot on the bottom step when I felt a slight tug on my elbow. I looked around. It was Saucer Eyes. On second inspection, she looked familiar. Had I seen her before? I just wanted to say, "Sir, thank you," or "Yeah, okay." But what exactly for? For showing me kindness and holding the door for me. I've been in London now for over a week and nobody seems to have time for anyone else. Everybody is so rude and rushing around in a hurry. It's not like back home. She spoke good English but with a heavy Spanish or Italian accent. The escalators moved slowly upwards and commuters pushed by us on our left, people rushing around, people in a hurry. Perhaps she had a point. And where exactly is back home? Santiago. So, I was wrong. She was from South America. I've never been to Chile before, but I've seen them play in the World Cup. Her face broke out into a grin, showing dazzling white teeth which lit up her face. All in all, it was a great combination. Her eyes seemed to be boring straight into my soul. Everybody says that. Santiago de Compostela is in Galicia in northern Spain. It's where the pilgrims walk to every year, she added. Oh, right then. By now we'd reached the top of the escalator and there was a brief awkward moment as if we were unsure what to do next. I'd just got my Oyster card out of my back pocket when, at 9:20 on a fine Monday morning in June, she delivered a big surprise. Say no if like, but do you want to have a coffee with me? She paused. I don't normally act like this, but you seem a nice person and you have kind eyes. My name is Pilar. I might seem kind, I thought, but I'm also married. Although it was she who'd suggested the coffee, I suddenly felt disloyal. I'd never strayed in 6 years of marriage, never even been tempted. Sure, we'd had our ups and downs like most couples, more downs lately perhaps, but unfaithful? Me? No way. Yes or no? What to do? Sod it, I thought. It's only a coffee. I'll go in late and blame the trains. It might help me relax and forget the presentation. Great idea. I know a good Costa's in Wilton Road. And that was when my life changed forever. Coffee at Costa's led to a walk along the South Bank and then lunch on the Tattershall Castle River boat. The late train had turned into sickness and diarrhea. They weren't very sympathetic, but I didn't care. I'd forgotten what a pleasure it was to discover someone else for the first time. I didn't tell Pilar any lies, nor hold back on any truths. It felt natural. Like it did in the beginning with Sarah. And, of course, lunch on the Thames turned into bed in the Strand Palace Hotel. At 3 o'clock exactly, the precise time I should have been starting my career-defining presentation, I was, instead, slipping off Pilar's red blouse whilst she sat on the side of the bed and shimmied out of her skinny jeans. The rooms in the Strand Palace were seedy. There was a smell of bad eggs and disinfectant in the corridors which seemed to match the tatty, orange carpet and faded walls. Somehow though it didn't feel seedy. It all seemed natural. At least it did until she told me the truth. Her name wasn't Pilar, it was Isabel. She wasn't a tourist either. She worked for the Angel Eyes detective agency. She'd been hired by Sarah, convinced that I'd been having an affair. It was all the late nights I'd been doing recently. Late nights to try and save my career and the same late nights trying to earn enough money to pay for the IVF treatment that was our last resort after trying for 5 wasted years to have a family. How could you do it? I said to Isabel. How can you live with yourself? I've never done anything like this before, wouldn't even have dreamed of it if you hadn't made the first move. At that point, I realized where I'd seen her before, the bus stop outside the Cost Cutters where I got my copy of The Independent every morning. She must have been working out my route to work, making sure she could approach me at the right place in time, doing Sarah's dirty work. It's my job. And then I can remember feeling confused as she started to sob. I won't tell her if you like, she said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. This has meant something to me too. It shouldn't have happened like this. You're a good man and I'm so sorry. This has been one of the best days of my life. You won't tell her because I'll fucking tell her. I'll tell her how she's become so screwed up that she's managed to wreck our marriage. And for what? I've never messed around and never would have done, and then a curious thing happened. I began to feel sorry for Isabel and, at the same time, anger towards Sarah. Real anger, anger that makes your head want to burst. I told Sarah everything and moved out later that night. My last memory was of her sobbing hysterically, clinging onto my arm. Too late. I shook her out of my life and slammed the door. The trust had gone. In a roundabout way she'd proved her suspicions. And I couldn't live with someone who didn't trust me. More to the point though, I'd fallen for Isabel. We were together from that moment on. She packed in her job at the detective agency and I lost my job at the advertising company. It didn't matter, I would have resigned anyway. The money I'd saved for the IVF treatment, my one real secret from Sarah, went to tide me over while I did a 1-year teacher training course. These memories, fresh now, flooded back as I read the paper. I thought about all the good times we'd had. They said she'd been lying in the house for over a week. Nobody had missed her. She had no close family living nearby. No friends to share her life. No one to share her hopes. It seemed so sad. Well, I had cared about her once. No, not cared, loved. I had loved her. Really loved her. Anger and guilt. Trust and consequences. Sarah couldn't live with it, childless, loveless and abandoned. She had made her choice. I folded up the paper and headed for the door. I needed fresh air in Neuroven. As I turned the corner towards Cost Cutters, I saw Isabel standing by a blue Mercedes. She was talking to a man I didn't recognize and wearing a green backpack that I hadn't seen for some time. She reached across and gave him a long lingering kiss and then stood waving and blowing kisses as he drove off towards the town center. She turned and walked back towards the house. She was smiling. And then she saw me. And that was when the smile faded. Trust and consequences. When the smile faded.